Hello, everybody. Good morning and welcome back to the latest edition of the Morning Bulletin here on the Blood Red channel. I'm your host, Edward Kay. Joining me this morning is James Martin, and we are, of course, going to be starting by discussing Jordan Henderson, who looks pretty set to be completing a move to Saudi Pro League side Al Etiifaq, who are obviously managed by Steven Gerrard. I mean, not sure we need to get into the blatant hypocrisy of being such a vocal champion of the Rainbow Laces campaign and then going to play your football in Saudi Arabia where it's illegal to be in a same-sex relationship. But I mean, just the way this is all sort of played out. I mean, he left out of the squad yesterday in Liverpool's first pre-season game. Looks like he's probably going to be leaving the training camp in Germany. It's just a really disappointing way to end his Liverpool career, isn't it, really, James?
Yeah, I mean, like you say, even putting all of that stuff to one side, which you can't do really, as you say, it's worth noting. It just feels very hypocritical, feels very disappointing. You know, you've seen the offer described as life-changing. Is it really life-changing for footballers who are already on, hundreds of thousands a week to earn a few more hundreds of thousands a week? Well, only they can answer that, and clearly Henderson's decided that it is. It's very disappointing, like you say, but yeah, even putting a pin in that for a minute, it's a sad way to end his Liverpool career. Obviously, he's won everything with the club. He's been the one lifting those trophies, the Hendo shuffle and everything. And yeah, he won't get a send off even really, because it's come out of nowhere. It wasn't like, you look at the end of last season, Naby Keita was getting a plaque, Oxlade-Chamberlain was getting a plaque, and Henderson will now leave sort of by the back door without any kind of proper goodbye. So. Yeah, there's just so many levels to it that are deeply disappointing. But he's clearly made his decision, and it is what it is, I suppose.
Yeah, it's an interesting point you make there about Naby Keita, actually, because everyone who's sort of made that point about the send-offs has sort of focused on Roberto Firmino and the amazing send-off he got from the Anfield crowd, from everyone. But yeah, even Naby Keita's got a better send-off than Jordan Henderson, really, hasn't it? It just doesn't feel right, and we'll get into the fee as well, because it's been reported at around £12 million. Obviously, the bid for Fabinho was around 40, I believe. And I think a lot of people can understand that one for Fabinho. Some people, I'm not necessarily convinced he was quite over the hill, but obviously he had a really not great season last season. And £40 million for a player at his age is verging on snap your hand off territory, really. But 12 million for your club captain when you've already lost your vice captain, it's going to be looking like we're going to have lost 6 midfielders in this summer. Do you think it's just for such a low fee that they're really putting a lot of pressure on the recruitment department now, aren't they?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's still a good deal in isolation. If you tried to stick a value on Henderson's head at the start of the summer, you'd probably have gone slightly lower than that, in the sense that he's 33, his best days are behind him, and Liverpool are going to be looking at it and thinking they were going to plan to reduce his minutes anyway. I think that much is clear from the recruitment that's already happened. I think really, if you're looking at the Henderson replacement, you'd probably be looking at Szoboszlai, who's already come in, and thinking, that was probably the plan there. So it does put more pressure on the shoulders of those who are already in the sense that, those minutes would have been balanced with Henderson in the initial plan, and now they are taking over in that role, really. And of course, the recruitment still to come. I think it's clear now that Liverpool needs at least 2 new midfielders, really, 2 more new midfielders. Anything else would be a bit of a concern. And of course, they're now coming into a bit of a leadership void. Like you say, Milner's gone, Henderson's gone. Even Fabinho, he wasn't a captain. I don't think he was in that captaincy group even, but he was a experienced figure. He'd been a key part of Klopp's team for a long time. So yeah, that gap will be felt, not necessarily even in quality, but just in terms of that experience. It's almost like starting from scratch, and that's exciting in its own way. It's definitely a kind of a new era has sort of been accelerated, but yeah, it comes with risks, and recruitment is a big area where that will be felt.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, when the bids were rolling in for Fabinho and Henderson, maybe thought that Fabinho might go and maybe Henderson might stay, but losing both, it puts Liverpool in a real tricky position in the market, I think, because everybody now knows Liverpool need at least one very good defensive midfielder. They can't go into the season with just Bajcetic in that number 6 role, and Henderson's sort of the closest thing we had to another defensive midfielder apart from Fabinho. And now sort of being linked to Cheick Doucoure of Crystal Palace, and they've turned around and said you can have him, but you can have him for £70 million. Do you think that price tag comes from partly, at least, from Liverpool's obvious need for a player in that department?
I think there's an element of that, and that's why I was sort of a little bit hesitant to kind of class Fabinho as like you called it, the kind of bite your hand off territory, because I think you're right. I think it's definitely a great price to be getting for someone who, like you say, had a questionable year in terms of form. He's turning 30 soon. Again, it's one where you look at it sort of outside of the context and you think, yeah, that's a brilliant deal. Liverpool have to take it. But then you look at what that 40 odd million will get you in the current market, and can it get someone who can adequately replace Fabinho? I mean, if Doucoure is 70 million, then clearly not. I mean, I think partly, like you say, its clubs are aware that Liverpool are in this predicament, and that's always been the way. But also, it's just the way the market's going, isn't it? I mean, they'll be looking at other deals that have been struck as kind of a reference point. I mean, Declan Rice has obviously massively inflated the market, and that's clearly a very different deal in the sense that he's been, one of the foremost performers in the Premier League over a sustained period. Doucoure's had one kind of breakout year, if you like, but the same applies to Caicedo. Obviously, he was more impressive last season, but Doucoure was Palace's player of the season, and Brighton they're demanding upwards of 70 million for Caicedo, who has played, I think, something like 45 Premier League games. It was basically his first season plus a handful of games in the previous one. So it's a position which is hard to recruit real quality in, and that scarcity brings with it big price tags. So much as it's a good deal for Fabinho, you do look at it and think, well, how are Liverpool going to reinvest this sensibly? And there are no names that really jump out as bargains at this point.
Yeah, there's a real birth of, I think, realistic good number 6 options on the market for Liverpool. I mean, Doucoure it's a strange link because he's never really stood out to me. But as you say, Palace's player of the season last season, I didn't realise he's actually only 23. And I think that probably puts him ahead of the likes of a Palhinha in the pecking order. Because I think a lot of fans, if Liverpool went out and replaced Fabinho with a guy who's literally a year younger in Palhinha, although he had a really good season with Fulham last year, I think a lot of fans would sort of be scratching their heads and be like, why didn't we just keep Fabinho, really? And as you say, they've just left themselves sort of hamstrung with the lack of realistic options on the market. And the focus now is, having been on, Liverpool needing a left-sided centre-back for the past few weeks, the focus now is just well and truly back on the midfield for recruitment, isn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, it's jumped right to the top of the priority list. And it does make you worry about that left-sided defence position. You wouldn't be hugely surprised if that kind of took a back seat now. And I think one of the earliest reports that mentioned Liverpool's interest in that kind of centre-back position was from the Echo right towards the start of the summer. And it said something along the lines of, this will happen within the next year, as if to say, it might happen this summer, but that there's a possibility that it could be kind of pushed back maybe one more window if necessary. And now that the focus is so much on the midfield, you do kind of worry that maybe Liverpool FSG think, we have to invest really heavily in the midfield. Let's chance it with that defence. And it's a big risk to take. Obviously, we can't dive into that until we know what happens. There's a long time left in the window, and hopefully Liverpool do still get to that position in good time. But yeah, the fact is that they've left themselves with a lot of things to juggle right now with, like you say, hopefully 2 more midfielders to come and this defender. It's a lot to get done. I mean, pre-season started. We obviously had the first game last night, and by this point, normally Liverpool would have wrapped up its business quite a long time ago. So yeah, it's all kind of new territory, and hopefully it all works itself out. There's plenty of time for Liverpool to kind of address these doubts in the market, thankfully. But there are a lot of live worries at the minute.
Yeah, well, one more of those worries, and I'm sure people on the channel are probably sick of us mentioning it, but Henderson out of the door, that's another homegrown player gone. Liverpool, they're sort of getting themselves into a position where players they do sign, they're going to have to start looking at people who would feature in that homegrown category, and that just adds an extra 10, 20, 30 million onto people's price tags nowadays, doesn't it, James?
Yeah, it definitely does. I mean, I think a lot of people do kind of slightly misunderstand it. It's definitely something the club will be looking at, and it will be a definite tick next to anyone's name if they are in that homegrown category. But it's not as if there's a number which Liverpool has to reach to be sort of able to register its squad. I mean, it's just basically homegrown players are kind of bonus players you get on top of your 17 non-homegrown players. I mean, last season Liverpool registered a squad of 24 because they were one short on the homegrown player count, and that was fine. It didn't feel like Liverpool's squad was too small. It didn't really feel like it was unduly limiting itself. But on the flip side of that, Milner's gone, Henderson's going. We're losing Oxlade-Chamberlain as well. That's 3 homegrown players out the door. And so, what was looking like, okay, it's 1 player short in the squad, it's not the end of the world, suddenly gets to the point where, it's becoming really quite limited. Klopp doesn't want a squad of sort of sub 20. That could be an issue. And, there's always the possibility that young players under 21s don't need to be registered so they can kind of make up the difference. But do we want to be going into the Premier League season relying on these kind of academy prospects to step up and play, a significant amount of minutes? I mean, if they're good enough, then yes, of course. But you want to have those players come up because they're ready to do so, not because the squad is short on options. So, yeah, it's yet another thing to think about with the homegrown aspect of things. I don't think the club will be panicking about that, but you would think if someone else comes through the door, in all likelihood, at least one of these new signings will probably be homegrown.
Yeah, as you say, plenty of issues for the recruitment department to be getting their head around at the moment. But that is all we're going to have time for here on the Morning Bulletin today. We will, of course, be back tomorrow morning with any breaking news on Fabinho Henderson and anything else that might happen. But James, for now, thanks for joining me, and we'll catch you next time.